I think those are great ways to stay stimulated during the day and help keep you engaged. Neuroplastically wise, that's phenomenal, especially if you feel like you aren't stimulated and maybe you are looking for more.
You might start getting these weird like numbness going down to the leg or tingling or weakness in the foot or other injuries that can occur. That usually stems from where the nerves come out and down to the body. So what can we do during driving? Are we able to move our hips tilting forward and backwards? Are we able to tilt side to side? Are we able to twist our pelvis in a clockwise formation, like around the world movement? Even if you do this once a day, that'll help save your whole back spine.
Welcome to the Functional Code, your go-to source for decoding optimal health. Join Dr. Addy and Dr. Jace as they break down the science behind pain, performance, longevity, and more, making complex concepts easy for you to understand and apply in your life. Your journey to a healthier you begins with understanding the Functional Code.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Functional Code, episode 35. Today, we are talking about bulletproofing the delivery driver. We've been talking about certain industries on just how to really protect yourself long-term for the kind of job that you have. We've hit everything from the office worker, from sitting to anywhere from 8-12 hours a day. We've touched on manual laborers who are out there working strenuous jobs. And now we are going to be talking about the delivery driver, which, believe it or not, millions and millions of people have a job similar to this. And we're going to get into the statistics of that shortly. This was something that we were excited to bring because I think it will help a lot of people. And it's very taxing to the body, this job. We're excited to get to that. So as always, I am Dr. Addy.
And I'm Dr. Jace. And yeah, we're super fortunate to actually have a buddy of ours, Corey, who was on the podcast last. His dad works as a delivery driver for the post office. So we got a chance to pick his brain on a few areas. Now, his job might be a little different from others that are in the same area, if we will, but we're going to bring some facts, some stuff from that point of view forward. So shout out to Marcus Brown. Appreciate you. So today we're going to go over some of the specifics with the job and where some of this is coming from now, only now, but even long term. Some of the effects on the body, again, long-term effects with that. Looking at physical, mental health. We're going to also look at the workstation and then also how you can have maintenance for you and your body long-term from there. Doc, super excited to dive into this and going through some of the stuff that you put in. I didn't even think about some of this stuff myself. So what are specific jobs that are involved with delivery drivers?
Yeah, the number one that popped up was e-commerce. So Amazon is the largest employer of delivery drivers. They have around 275,000 delivery drivers in its network.
Damn.
Next to that is UPS and FedEx, which UPS, as of 2023, had about 125,000 delivery drivers. FedEx around 50,000 independent contract drivers. When you take a look at e-commerce alone, just from those three companies, about 500,000 jobs. Wow. And which, once we get to this next section too, that's just crazy to hear how many people have a job like this. And I think there are plenty of individuals out there who are going to appreciate just some of the information that we're sharing, especially when it comes to making sure that if this is something you want long-term, how can you go about avoiding the unfortunate side effects of having a job like this? And can you prevent it, or at least make it somewhat manageable over time? Next is food delivery. DoorDash has around 2 million active dashers in the United States. They account for around 60% of the U.S. food delivery market, next to Uber Eats, which is around 25%, which is around 1 million drivers. So 3 million drivers active total just from food delivery alone from two companies, which, again, a crazy amount of numbers. It was surprising to hear. I didn't think there was that many freaking dashers. Like, I would never have known. And some of them are sure I'm part-time, but to still think that there's that many, that's more than some states have population-wise in the United States.
That's incredible.
So super interesting. Next was obviously the USPS, around 336,000 career employees, which most are delivery drivers, were in that survey. DHL, XPO are logistics delivery companies, around 20,000 each. And then lastly was retail, grocery delivery, which like Walmart and Instacart has around 500,000 active shoppers. And then Walmart uses its own delivery service, which again, I'm sure there's several 100,000, if not several thousand of individuals that are involved in these kinds of jobs. When you add it up just from this page alone, we're looking at close to 3-4 million individuals who have a job just from these companies, not alone trucking companies. We didn't even get into that. I bet if you really think about that, double it, we're looking at close to 5 to 10 million individuals who are working very hard to make sure things are getting where they're going and risking their body long term for these are, I know some individuals who are trucking 16 hours a day, many days a week, many times a year, and it's very taxing on the body. And I can't imagine, what that is going to be like after a certain amount of time. Any way we can help limit the effects, I think, is going to be very helpful for you guys. So I know we have this little key statistics chart. I think, Doc, we'll just put that up there for them. Perfect. If they want to just see that. And understand that if you do this long enough, that's where early on we maybe can get away with certain things, but it's tough to really look forward and look into the future, especially if this is early in your career. And if you don't understand what this can do to the body, it's only going to make it more difficult, not just having that perspective. And I think too many times we see patients on the latter end of that versus just the preventive end. And we really do wish we could see more individuals coming into the clinic who are interested in just maintenance prevention of things getting worse versus I've already let it go so long and now I'm in dire need of help, which no more, obviously not. We're gonna help you. And we love every one of you that asks for our help. But we really want to preface, if it doesn't have to be that way.
Yes.
And we want to help you prevent that. That's what we're going to be jumping into today.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So as we go into some of like these skeletal conditions, the huge area of concern is repetitive movements. It's you find yourself in a truck, a car, I'm talking majority right now, and you get out of the car the same way multiple times over and over again. You have to think about the stress. Obviously, I'm sure you guys are feeling it. The stress on the body, lower back, the knees especially, which we'll talk on here in a little bit, feet, neck, everything. Now, when we look at how you can go about counteracting some of these movements, there's not many things that you can switch around, but being aware of, do you have discomfort, even if it's slight aches, to be on top of those earlier on is incredibly important. I know we touched on this in the last episode for the hard laborious jobs and construction workers. So a lot of this stuff in today's episode, I would suggest reverting back to that in terms of the timestamps and those specific topics there. But I guess, Doc, from the patients that you've seen who are delivery drivers, especially neck, back, and any of the other areas of the musculoskeletal system, what are some of the common areas that comes to your mind?
If they're usually, whether or not they're in and out of the vehicle, more than likely they're going to be sitting for a long period of time. So the back is going to be number one. If they're longer on the road, not moving their head often, the neck will be of a concern for them as well. You add in just different lifestyle choices of being on the road, whether that's obesity that leads to other pain modulations and strain and stress on certain joints, that will add up. Plus, if you happen to carry cargo that's very heavy and you're not lifting that, the back is going to be another portion of that, even the shoulders, possibly knees. So yeah, we see a lot of the joints that Doc brought up, and we're going to get into kind of what to expect long term and what are the statistics showing that you maybe want to think about moving forward, because we're about to show definitely some unfortunate information when it comes to just how many people are struggling as far as this occupation, because it's no fun to be in pain. But it just also gives us perspective to what do you need to do to prevent these from happening, because you are definitely at a higher chance with some of these injuries. Number one, nearly 40% of work-related musculoskeletal injuries in delivery drivers were due to lifting heavy packages and awkward postures. Something that we talk about, super preventative. We know we can absolutely adapt to those scenarios, whether that's with assistance of technology or tools, or just how you are doing it yourself, asking for help too. We've touched on that. Super preventable. You got to understand that in those times where you're maybe tired and it's the end of the day and you're just like, I got to get this, these last packages off, and I'm just going to maybe shortcut or be lazy. That is the time that it gets you, is when you're not thinking about it. And I get, we're all human and days are tough, and I totally get that, but it really makes a difference when you are lifting appropriately and doing what's needed to avoid that back from going out or what have you. Super interesting stat. The next one that was interesting was 20% of musculoskeletal disorders that led from days away from work were delivery drivers and truck drivers. So 20% of the injuries that happen that cause disability or days away from work are in delivery drivers and truck drivers. Why is that important? We talked about that last episode. If we're going to be getting injured and missing work, now we can't, you're not making money providing, and that's going to be tougher on mental status, all those things that come with that too. Just things that we want you to think about. Back and neck pain, we talked about that. Doc, I know there are some things that you talked about last episode on counteracting movements. If you're going to be doing something for a period of time, what does that look like in regards to either training towards that or working towards that to make it not as difficult, or to actually train the tissues that are maybe being used repetitively, and what does that look like for them?
Absolutely. A couple areas that you can consider, and there's going to be limitations for some people moving forward. How you get up from a seated position. Do you stand up and twist? That's going to be an important factor. If so, you want to take in consideration hips, lower back, especially knees and feet, of course. So if you are able to either turn your body completely straight forward and then stand up, if at all possible, that will also help significantly from there. Also, when you land from a standing position, stepping out of the vehicle, do you step down the same way? So for example, if I'm in America, I'm driving on the left side of the vehicle, when I get out, turn left and step down, I put usually my left foot down first. If I have constant discomfort with knees, hips, lower back, am I able to turn my body completely and step down potentially with the opposite foot? So you're counteracting the common movement that you typically have. That would be another way that you can look about it. Getting into the vehicle is probably going to be, there's not many other ways you can go with that, if we will. But small little subtleties of stuff that I've heard from past patients of the discomforts they have and certain ways that they can go about it. These are some tools that has worked for them. And theoretically, it makes sense to take less pressure off of common strains of movement that you find yourself in terms of absorbing the load of your body from one area in the vehicle down onto the ground. That absorption, especially for the knees, which are not usually able to allow as much rotation for longer periods of time, and for reps on end with that one, getting in and out of the car, they'll take a brunt of that stress. But in terms of lower back and neck, there's different ways that you can go about for the healing purpose when you are in the vehicle, which we'll get to at the end of the podcast. But are there ways that you can switch up the typical movements or ways that you perform your job? And can you use the complete opposite side of your body, or twist in the complete opposite way that you typically would? Which there's certain limitations we understand, and we respect you and everyone and how you do your job. But there's certain things that if you are able to start to think about from there. Now, in terms of knees, shoulders, most of the time with delivery drivers, we see knee discomfort quite often, much like I said, for the rotational work of the knee. Now, that's going to involve a bunch of different things. Ideally, outside of work, you want to add in knee training and working in different planes, whether that's lunges forward and backwards, or side to side movement, or even crossing your legs over and then doing almost like a curtsy squat to a certain extent so you can stress some of the tissues on the outside. We're going to get to more specifics at the end there, but that's how you can go and start to build up your knees. But the knees aren't able to take pressure against load as you're twisting and getting out of the vehicle for time on end. So if you're able to turn your body in and out, you go. Obviously watch your head on the top so you don't knock your noggin. That is perfect. In terms of shoulders and just even holding and gripping the mail, or any type of packages, it's going to take a large portion of grip strength, but it's also going to involve you having and holding weight in front of you. So are you able to either hold packages off to your side so your arms and shoulders don't round forward time on end, which breaks down the front part of the shoulder? Are you able to potentially hold a lighter package above your head or hold it straight up? I know it sounds and may look a little dumb and idiotic, but that will help put more pressure on certain other areas, especially lats and back, which can help take pressure off the front of your shoulders as well. Now, in terms of the hand and elbow discomfort, which when I was talking to Marcus Brown, again, shout out, he's saying there's a lot of people that, especially for post office workers, that sometimes they have to sort through mail. So they have a huge stack and they just put one in a different bin. Obviously, they want to be time efficient to get through their day, because once they get through their tasks, they're usually done for the day. So whether that's they get done at 2 o'clock or whether it's 7, 8 o'clock at night, they just have to get through their order and through their day. So speed is going to be important, but also longevity is going to be another important thing. Thinking about some of the things that he brought up, I would challenge a few of you to start the process of, if you are right-handed and if you continually hold like mail in your left hand and bring from left hand to right hand and then either put mail into boxes, are you able to start the process maybe outside of work or playing around with it on a lighter day, holding the stack of mail on your right hand and then sorting through your left? Neurologically, brain-wise, it'll help for counteracting both sides there, but also help take less pressure off of rotational work of the elbows, wrists, which will then lead to less tendinitis, tendinosis, strains, sprains of the forearm, which can lead to a bunch of other problems, especially carpal tunnel syndromes as well. So are you able to be a little more ambidextrous is going to be an important thing. And then we'll get to some tools at the end, but Doc, have you heard or seen any other patients with some of these other conditions, especially elbows or hand? Because I thought that was interesting myself. I never thought about
that's
that.
great. Even using a sling fashion tool to help lift. I know that they make those sometimes for packages, always to help just take pressure off. And I think this was a prototype. I don't know if it's going to be mainstream or not, but they're now in surgeons using this exoskeleton to actually help create, I think it was like 6 or 10 less pounds of weight on their arms while they work.
Whoa.
And so it was this, almost looked like this carbon fiber rod that went behind their arm system and then connected into the back. And when it was turned on, it was this like system where it took pretty much all the weight off of their arms so they could work for long periods of times. And I don't know, you could Google it, maybe they've made it already, but those kinds of pieces of technology, if it's not obviously taxing on the budget, but also maybe think about it as a long-term investment strategy too, where could you purchase these slings where you can very quickly put them around big packages, and then that way you're using all parts of the body other than just arms and back. Those are all things that I think thinking forward to helping with. Obviously, I know you guys have dolly systems, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of that too, but those times where maybe the package isn't big enough to require that, okay, how can I still give myself that advantage? And at the time, it doesn't seem like it, but over years, it really does add up. And so anytime you can take strain and stress off the body, that's prevention right there. That's how you're going to maintain. But as far as hands, elbows, wrists, I think just building up the strength to do the job, but also handle the repetitive load that's going to be put on them. And it's just going to take consistency and discipline. Grip strength is going to come from lifting weights, grabbing things, making sure that you're building the appropriate tissues up. That's kind of what we got. Yeah. Next up, comorbidities. These are just, and I'm not going to get too far into these. I think we've hit a lot of these in past episodes. So if you guys want to talk or look at how to manage these yourself, obviously we have resources for you guys available. But obesity, just because obviously the nature of driving, sedentary, combined with unfortunate eating habits. If you're on the go, we talked about that last episode. Over 50% of truck drivers, delivery drivers were classified as obese in one study, and they are 2.5 times more likely to develop cardiovascular diseases compared to the general population. That's a little worrisome, guys. Okay. That's like okay, I got to start taking a look at my life. What kind of habits do I got going on? Am I a little heavier set? Am I eating? Am I fitting this category? And if I am, that should be a little worrisome. We want you guys to obviously live a very long, happy life. We don't want your families to have to, worry about those kinds of things. And it's scary. It's scary to have those issues. First and foremost, it's just recognizing the risk and being prepared. Lastly, there was one study that showed delivery drivers actually had 50% higher chance of heart disease compared to non-sedentary occupations. We're seeing that both on ends of as far as weight gain and heart change. You're definitely not saying that it's not going to happen to you. What we're saying is you're at a higher risk, right? Just due to the nature of the job. So can you avoid it? Absolutely.
And why is it happening? Like, humans weren't made to sit for longer periods of time. And if you're sitting, blood's going to pool in certain areas, which if you don't have blood flow coming back to your heart, lungs, and then back out from there, that's where some of these problems arise.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where you have to take as much effort as you can outside of work, or if you can during the job, for working your cardiovascular system. Cardio will help significantly.
For sure.
Yeah.
The next area was mental health. 67% of delivery drivers reported high levels of job-related stress. I don't know in which regards. I think what they put was maybe just meeting delivery deadlines, navigating traffic, dealing with customers, just what I would expect a lot of the stress to come from, maybe even from having to lift really heavy packages all the time, just stress on the body. I'm sure there's a lot of things that could come with that. But rates of depression were 20% higher than the average population delivery drivers. Again, maybe it's just the repetitive task, what have you. But Doc, I know that you looked and studied a lot with certain forms of mental health. Why is this not only in this population, but just why it's so common, and what are some things that I think people don't understand about anxiety and depression?
And this is some of the stuff I talked about, like I said, with Marcus Brown, who is delivery driver and also post office worker. It's when you do the same tasks every single day without seeing the improvement or without seeing a change or a progression, it can be taxing mentally. And that's where you start seeing some of these other symptoms. Obviously, you can see with the results like depression, anxiety, stress. When you start messing with dopamine systems, and dopamine is for the pursuit towards something or for the improvement, or you're working towards a goal or a task at hand. When you take that out of the equation and you're in this space for hours at end, and this is your job, your livelihood, I'm sure the benefits, we know that they're awesome. Pays, I'm sure, not terrible, but your mental health long-term will start taking a beating. So that's where you start looking at, are there other ways that you can improve the dopamine systems or reward happiness, just the pursuit actually towards something? Because every single day they get mail, they have to deliver packages, and it's the same thing over and over again without seeing any progression. That's where we're going to talk on the end here of different ways that you can add in and to improve your dopamine system.
Lastly, sleep disorders. Up to 30% of delivery drivers reported having some form of either poor sleep quality, insomnia, which that doesn't help with mental well-being. Obviously, can increase accident risk, lower the ability to recover if we do have injury, and just overall well-being. We did an entire episode on sleep, the importance of sleep. We can't say enough of just how important it is. That's, anything with sleep, Doc.
No.
I think we've hit the nail on the head on that one. pretty much in the last episodes.
And that's where it can bleed if you feel like you're overworked, if you feel like you're just drained mentally. That's where you just taking a retreat, getting away from just the city, the life, and getting to nature, getting somewhere that you find enjoyable, which then bleeds into fatigue and exhaustion and how you can better manage some of those symptoms. Doc, I saw you've touched on a few things here. What have you found with fatigue and exhaustion for
So
drivers?
55% of drivers reported chronic fatigue, which
Wow.
of course increases, we talked about increases risks of accidents, errors, and poor health. But the fatigue, I'm sure, comes from a lot of forms of things. It's tough to really understand what probably causes it, but just the fact that it can be something that you might have to deal with only then should put priority on the things that you can do to prevent fatigue and exhaustion, which we know enough about. For those of you listening, it's going to be sleeping well, eating well, moving when you have the ability to move. It's going to be getting out in nature. It's going to be doing things you enjoy. And it's going to be trying to separate yourself from job, which I think many industries deal with too, not just this industry. But yeah, that stat alone should at least give you some insight into what things to work on, so that obviously you don't get to that point, which it's no fun to be so exhausted that you can't even do your job. That's some people, that's all they want to do. So next segment, we're going to really just help bring you some ways to continue to bettering yourself all around as an individual. And you're on the road long periods of time. Sometimes it's maybe just peaceful to listen to some music. Maybe other times you just drive without any stimulation. I know I enjoy that after a long day, so I get that. But there is now this period of time that you have available. What can you do? I know you may feel like you are limited to obviously the driver, and obviously focusing on the road is going to be most important. But is there things that you can also be doing that doesn't really take your focus away from your job? And Doc, I know, is going to do a great job of just talking about that. So Doc, can you learn new skills on this job, and what might that look like?
Absolutely. So going back to the dopamine system and the progression towards something, or to learn a new skill, or to entertain yourself during your job and responsibilities, I think, yes, I think that you can do that either learning podcasts, like all the episodes of the Functional Code. Perfect tools for you there.
Great tools, guys.
YouTube videos, audiobooks, something that can engage you. Either you're entertained by listening to, or something that you can listen to how to perform a new skill, whether that's, let's say you're a delivery driver, but you love woodworking. Are you able to listen to someone who does some awesome woodworking skills, or different ways to make different objects? That would be an area that I think would help mentally for your pursuit towards learning something new. Whatever interests you have outside of work, if you can perform your job but learn these different things, and whether it's, like we said, listening to these things, or even having conversations with your family, either sending out voice memos to people you haven't talked to, friends, even putting out maybe like a podcast yourself while you're driving, just like your life lessons for the day, so you can help individuals moving forward from there on any of the areas you find interest in, is really good. The last thing for mental mindset and / motivation would be breathing regulation. Now, I'll kind of touch on some of the basics, and then I'll go into the reasons why, and then how and when. Anytime you breathe, you can either stimulate or ramp up your nervous system, energy awareness, or you can calm it down. The more inhales versus exhales you take, so like hyperventilation, that will have a significant impact to build up and upregulate your nervous system for attention awareness, versus downregulate, where you need more exhales or longer time exhaling versus inhaling, which has a calming effect. Whether you just got to work and you're feeling tired, fatigued, groggy, how can you upregulate? So maybe you're getting into a car, you just mentally need to be there. Go into inhales more than exhales. There's a bunch of different types and ways you can go about that, but just the premise, more inhales, or the time you inhale versus exhale, will help upregulate that. Let's say you're you're starting to get tired at the end of the day, you can also utilize that to stay mentally awake, to keep you engaged on the road as well.
Especially if you don't want to use caffeine as a
yes.
substance. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so for example, let's say we come into a situation to where, let's say you have a very stressful day, especially Christmas. We have a lot of respect for any delivery drivers around the holidays. We know that you're taking on way more effort and more work, and we appreciate you for that. So maybe for those situations, you focus more on exhale breathing, or the time you exhale, or the double inhale exhale with a prolonged exhale. That is where you can re-regulate your system a little bit more depending on certain situations that can come up. So to keep you mentally engaged, the pursuit towards something, whether it's listening or learning something in the car, having conversations, creating an audiobook, or regulation breathing, all will help for mental health and mindset moving forward. Doc, is there any others that you can think of?
No, that's great. I think as long as it doesn't take away from the job at hand, I think those are great ways to stay stimulated during the day and help keep you engaged. Neuroplastically wise, that's phenomenal, especially if you feel like you aren't stimulated and maybe you are looking for more, and maybe the job you're doing is too repetitive for you and you are looking for something that's a little bit more engaging. That's where you said like you're learning a new skill and doing those kinds of things can absolutely be a great time to do those kinds of activities. No, I think that's great. Breathing, love it. Breath work, I use it every day. And I think more should use breathing, I think, to regulate certain things. I know that when it comes to the workstation for the vehicle, there isn't much that we can switch around. I think the main points that we want you to really think about is, one, the distance you are from the pedal. The closer is you can get without being right next to the steering wheel is usually better as far as not having to have this outstretched foot, which just causes too much compensation as far as that the lower limb and the back goes. So just keeping that in mind. Next would be if you do have lumbar support, it can be helpful for those longer drives. So, something to think about there. Something else would be tailoring your pants so you don't need a belt. Because I think wearing a belt and you're sitting for long periods of times, we see so much compression at the hip, which can cause a lot of issues. We see it all the time with truck drivers, delivery drivers coming in with lateral leg numbness because there's a nerve that's close to the groin area that gets compressed when wearing a belt. And then obviously sitting, it's causing even more compression. Tailoring the pants so you don't need a belt, in that way that avoids that compression, be something to think about. Making sure that you're not leaning a certain one way outside of the window or against the console for too long. You'd be surprised at what kind of issues that actually causes over time, especially years of doing it. Making sure that you're switching up maybe how you're holding things. I even love taking the time every hour, maybe even a half hour, to do full ranges of motion if possible, whether that's either at a stoplight or that's where you're maybe at a gas station break, filling up, where you can then just very quickly bring yourself through full ranges of motion in the body, quick workspaces. I think that's super, super helpful. But yeah, just as far as the workstation goes, though, you really just want to make sure that if you feel like it's very uncomfortable to do this job for that long, and yes, they're going to have aches and pains sitting for that long anyway, it's then what can you do to change that? Is there something you can do to change that? And if you feel like you can't, well, then you need to be outside of your job, training the systems of the body. We did a great series on the office worker who sits a lot. There are some things I think you can throw into your regimen there too. But yeah, Doc, I know before we could maybe jump into that next part, is there anything you wanted to talk on with that?
Those are great points,
Okay.
by the way. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, there's a couple others like to take from the sitting for periods of time, especially look at the headrest, because if it's naturally pointing forward and if you rest your head back but your head's still forward, it's still putting pressure on your upper back where most people feel the stress. So are you able to either bring that backwards? If not, I don't necessarily want to say take the headrest off because of potential whiplash, like your neck, risk versus reward is important there. Either asking a manager or helping in a way to bring that from forward to backwards to better help your system. Beautiful.
Yeah.
In terms of shoe support, I know we touched on this in the last episode with the construction worker. It's going to be a little different. Obviously, there's going to be certain limited selections based on what the company would want you to wear. And I know they've done studies and they've put time and effort to investing into their employees, so they have a good idea. But in a perfect world, you would want a shoe that has good either cushion support and allowing a little bit of mobility throughout the whole shoe itself. But that's
and the lighter the
please.
Possible.
Oh,
That's
good
it.
point. Yes.
The lighter the better. So that's really the only, other than that, I think that's great.
And then as we go into cooling the body, and I almost would want you to revert back to the construction worker in terms of if you work in hotter temperatures, if you don't have air conditioning, potentially taking a mister with ice water and having a fan. So you can take that out, especially with your core body temperature. It can only be regulated in mainly 4 areas: the forehead, the palms of the hands, the bottom of the feet, and to a certain extent, the armpits. So if you feel hot, overheated, those are where you'd want cool water, ideally a convection state. So you'd want running water in a perfect world. But for this situation, either a damp towel, whether that's in an ice cooler that you can put into the vehicle. Refrain the best you can from putting any cool towel over your back of your neck, mainly because if the body is overheated and you put a cold stimulus, it's going to want to increase the temperature. So it's going to then create more heat exhaustion, versus if the towel was then on the forehead, it will downregulate because of the type of cell it has and communicates to the core body temperature. So that's huge aspect. Obviously, in colder temperatures, winter, adding on layers, heat packs, that's an obvious. You guys should already know there. I don't have to touch on too much of that one, but yeah, those are some of the main areas of the workstation that you can get around. I'm sure there's some small tweaks here and there depending on what type of delivery driver you have and what type of vehicle you have. The space will also matter significantly. Are you on the right side, left side? Driving, like that all matters. And what way do you get out of the car? What way do you not? To counteract those movements is also important there. But
And then I guess the only last thing that came to my mind was if you're in a vehicle that has some elevation while getting out, you may jump down onto the ground versus stepping down or getting closer to the ground before you plant. That repetitive drop and landing can be very tough on the joints, especially the knees, ankles, hips. Just being cautious about that, making sure that you're either using your vehicle to handle or what have you to get down. Don't just, this is probably for younger folk than anything, but we're only young until we're not. And that just adds up. And you're going to be wishing that you didn't do that kind of activity or movement down the road when your knees are sore. Just be cautious. Try to think about this body as something that is going to have to be a part of the game long term too. It's easy to switch out a tire on a vehicle. It's easy to maintain the vehicle, but we can't just switch out body parts. Okay. We can, for the most part, take that with a grain of salt, because I know what you guys are thinking as far as surgery and what have you, but it changes when you guys have surgery. Okay. If you're lifting heavy packages and you're thinking that you're just going to get 2 brand new shoulders, I'm sorry to tell you, your surgeon didn't tell you this. You aren't able to lift a lot of weight with these prosthetics. So it's, oh crap, wait, I didn't tell me that. The real goal is to maintain what you have long term. You absolutely can do that. You just need to be cognizant and obviously train to do this job outside of the day to day. And obviously we're gonna get into that, Doc, before we do, if there's anything else.
Yeah, just in terms of when you first start the day, we know that obviously you have to get through a task. Once you're done with that task or that mail, that load, what have you, you're done for the day. So ideally, body is just as important. Mind is just as important. So for the body, what joints are you utilizing? For most delivery drivers, it's going to put a lot of stress on the knees, hips, feet, ankles. We're also going to look at these other type of delivery drivers for larger packages. That's where you want to then warm up some of the tissues of the shoulders, a scapula, a shoulder blade. elbows for sure, hands, wrists. So going through full joint circles, pain-free, slowly, both directions to warm up your body. And that's 5 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
Just 3 cycles through both directions for all the joints from your toes all the way up to your head, fingers, hands. Works significantly well for the long-term maintenance structure. It allows more blood flow to the tissues and the edges of the joints. The edges of the joints will also have a neurological component to allow for less tightness, guarding, and compensation. And also it'll allow for shock absorption, and it's also going to allow for less risk of injury moving forward. That is something, joint focus, workspaces, controlled articular rotations. There's a bunch in our past videos, body series, and even from last episode as well. So there's that. I know we touched on counteractive movements in terms of if you constantly get out the same way, can you switch up and outside of work? Last episode, Doc brought up medicine ball throws from one side to the other of the opposite way in which you typically rotate. So that, I think that's amazing. That's perfect. The part that for every delivery driver that I've ever worked with, it's knees are always in the equation. So that's where I want to sit down and break down a couple different things with you. We want to work the knees in multiple planes of motion, whether it's forward and backwards, sagittal plane, side to side, frontal plane, or transverse rotational plane, if we will. To build up the strength in your knees, especially if you get in and out of the car and drop down to your left side, you want to make sure that you do rotational work and build up the hamstrings and also the joints of the knee. So that's then going to evolve going through what we know as knee workspace, to where start straight, bent, it doesn't matter. You keep your femur straight, you turn your foot outwards, and you bend your knee as much as you can as your foot is rotate out. Rotate in at a fully bent knee, straighten from there, and you can go into a circle, clockwise, counterclockwise, go through very slowly. Now, for especially the people in their left knees, working on the left hamstring and bringing your toes inwards and straighten and extend your legs for a period of time will help build up the hamstrings, semimembranosus, tendinosus, doesn't matter too much names wise, over and over again. So you're able to allow the counteractive movement so you have less pressure on the outside of your joint, thus less knee surgeries moving forward from there. So that's one area. That's the rotational component. Now, you can also rotate by putting a little bit of pressure of your heels into the ground with stabilizing your top thigh femur and then rotating side to side. Now, to build up strength, well, ideally just going through on and off throughout the day, even when you're driving, perfect. Now, let's say we want to build up strength around the tissues of the joint, adding in a band which goes around your heel and attaches to the foot, either outside wrapping in or inside wrapping out, and then going through the same rotations with your heel putting pressure into the ground and you're twisting inwards and outwards. That'll help significantly. You can do that at 90 degrees. You can do it, your leg is almost straight, not completely straight, because then it locks out and forces everything to your ankles and hips, but even 90 degrees to almost bent. So that's a huge rotational component, which will help everyone. Now, if we bring our knees over our toes, working in the sagittal plane or forward and backwards, whether your heels are on the ground or not, are you able to build up the strength of your knees, and specifically the patellar tendon, which is a tendon which connects to the bottom and top portion of your kneecap? The more that you can strengthen, increase the mobility, the better you are at absorbing weight getting out of the car and less pain you're going to have there. Also, building up the hamstring strength. So whether it's going to a gym, doing knee bends, but the part that most people negate is when you bend your knee, are you able to bend your knee and rotate your foot outwards and leg outwards to where you're getting that posterior 45-degree angle? That then helps for shock absorption and also helps for some of the tissues of the outside portion of the hamstring, IT band, outside portion of vastus lateralis, quads, and then same thing, bending the leg in and back to the 45-degree, which then also gets the hamstrings and some of the tissues on the inside portion of the thighs as well. So those are key factors specifically for everyone. And then to work in the frontal plane are side-to-side movements, whether it's lunges side to side or curtsy squats, to where one foot is crossed behind the other and then you go down to squat position, or the leg that's crossed over is in front or back. Either or would be similar. Those are usually work with explosive movements for agility, especially football athletes, running backs specifically. Now, to also help adding in with knee training of legs, foot, you also want to make sure that you're having proper support and mobility of your feet. Ideally doing this outside of work, barefoot, so you can transfer and absorb weight significantly. So whether you're bringing and going through some of the movements that you're training for your knees, so like I said, doing like side lunges or the curtsy squats, doing those barefoot, so you are able to grip the ground and are able to allow your feet to absorb different forces of your body or external weight against the ground, which will also help build up arches as well from there. Doc, is there any that you have? I got a few more.
Oh, no, so far,
Break it up a little bit.
I think we've talked about this now numerous times, and I think the reason we continue to bring it up is because they're easy movements, but doing them continuously, discipline over time, we're talking take up all the parts of the body that you want to work on. We're talking anywhere from 3 to 5 parts of the body, 1 to 2 minutes each. It really won't take long. And it's maybe new to you, but it really isn't difficult. And we're not asking you guys to go and lift we're not looking to build you up to go lift 300-400 pounds in the gym. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to just build up this consistency of movement and specific training to these areas that you think you're working, but you're not working appropriately. And it's this way to train that actually allows for healthier flow of blood flow to the tissues. It allows for great waste to be exhumed out. And not only that, you think just because you're on your feet all day, you're working your legs, but that's not how it works. And so this is why it's so important to listen up to what Doc has been saying.
There's a few more that I want to target that I think for most people will have some damage to the area or could have potential degeneration. Let's specifically look at the lower back. Now, when we're driving for longer periods of time, especially if you don't have a lumbar support, which helps almost force curvature from back to forward to help hold you upright, if you are sitting backwards for periods of time, it's going to lead to a straighter lower back spine, which we know you have bones in your lower back, and in between those are discs. With less curve puts more pressure on the discs, which then leads down to degenerative disc disease. It will also allow and force compensation and lack of function to the joints, which then there's degenerative joint disease. And then over time, years, months, even with no pain itself, it can lead to breakdown of the structure, and then randomly you might start getting these weird like numbness going down to the leg or tingling or weakness in the foot or other injuries that can occur. That usually stems from where the nerves usually come out and down to the body. So what can we do during driving? Are we able to move our hips tilting forward and backwards? Are we able to tilt side to side? Are we able to twist our pelvis in a clockwise formation, like around the world movements? Those all will have a significant impact. And ideally, even if you do this once a day, that'll help save your whole back spine. The more movement that you can perform in an area with less stagnation, which will allow less degeneration, which will also force your body to not degenerate and cause your bones to lead to like bone spurs, which then leads to arthritis. And it's just a never-ending cycle moving forward from there, but movement's going to be a key. Now, let's go into the neck. So I know we touched on the headpiece. If your head's forward, how can we counteract that to bring the head back? And I know Doc brought this up quite a bit as well in the past and even today, of bring your chin forward to backwards. So you're retracting your head back. And you can do this whether you're retracting your head backwards and forward as you're tilting your head from side to side, or you can do that tilting your chin back laying on a flat surface. Your chin is tucked to your chest and lifting your head up off the ground, holding that there as long as you can. Once you notice your chin starts to go upwards, reset and relax from there, which then helps for tension headaches. We brought that up in the sitting podcast for the office worker. Hugely important on that one. And even Doc said going through neck circles, biggest range of motion, pain-free as you possibly can throughout the day. Beautiful. For shoulder mobility, and I touched on elbows, fingers here in a little bit, they'll be along the same pathway. Anytime we're lifting objects in front of us, especially delivery drivers that are moving larger packages, it's going to force a lot of pressure and rolling of our shoulders forward, which then lengthens some of the tissues on the upper back, which you can look at this as upper cross syndrome. It's just a thing in itself of pressure of certain body areas overworked for longer periods of time. Now, when that happens, it's going to shorten the distance between your sternum or your front chest bone and your ribs. It's going to also force the tension of your shoulders around and forward. So what is that doing? Specifically for the shoulders, there's a muscle underneath your collarbone known as the subclavius, and it helps regulate the tension to the whole front portion of your shoulder. So when that happens, it's then going to force guarding and other compensations to the capsule in your shoulder. So how can we go about addressing to open that up so we don't have problems with our AC joint or our glenohumeral joint or our whole shoulder complex? We can do this by bringing our shoulders back together and depress downwards. We can then bring either our arms up off to the side or overhead and then allow our whole arms to rotate as our shoulder blades are back, which then allows proper contraction relaxation of the pecs, of the subclavius muscle underneath the collarbone, the front portion of the capsule, and it takes more pressure and it helps strengthen the back side where everything's lengthened to bring everything from forward in front of us into the center of our body to where it opens up to the center of our body in the back. So that's a really good way, and that you can go throughout your day to stretch, but also mobilize the tissues from there. And then lastly, as we're working down the arm in terms of tools, especially grip strength, which I know we touched on in the beginning, you guys are going to be very strong, your wrist flexors and your forearms. Are you putting as much pressure and effort on the tissues on the backside of wrist extensors? Cool, awesome way that you can look at this. When you look at your arm, forearm, and your wrist, hand, when you have tightness in your forearms on the front portion, you might notice that your wrist will deviate forward, and then it'll almost look like a weird divot on the back of your hand, which then can lead to carpal tunnel syndromes, weakness. If you start noticing that sign, you then definitely want to stress working the joints, so wrist circles, both directions, but also strengthening and opening up all the intrinsic muscles of your hands. So extending your hands backwards, wrist backwards, opening up the fingers so they're not together, and then holding that for a period of time, even during the job, whether you're steering, maybe one hand steering, the other one is strained off to the side, and then switch if you're able. If you're able to from there. So that's a really good way. And then for addressing more of the tissues from bottom up, we have a exercise in clinic that can be tissue target specifically, known as P-soup rolls or pronation supination rolling. So more or less what that means is bringing your palms down to the ground and up to the ceiling. You can do this arm straight to arm bent into a bicep curl as you're rotating palms down and up. You can also do this arms off to your side, which gets a little bit more tissues on the inside portion of the elbow versus if you do the same thing as you bring your forearm, arm inwards across your body, going palm down, the palm up as you strain and bend your arm. Wherever you feel like there's a good stretch and pressure and tension, especially when you bring your palms facing forward and rotating your arm outwards and strain your arm to bending your arm, that will help take a lot less pressure off of the front wrist flexors, which will then help from deteriorating and causing tendinosis or degeneration of the tendons and/or of any other injuries to the elbow itself. Those are a couple awesome tools that you can have long term. And I know we touched on switching up grip strength, holding the mail and putting in different slots. Are you able to go to your left hand and then working and building that up for the long-term maintenance of your body moving forward from there? Yeah, a couple awesome tools that you have. Long-term, you probably want to go back, rewind. If you still have questions from here, there's also other tools in our body region series that we brought up and broke down before. Yeah, I think all these will help significantly for every delivery driver.
For sure. And really the only thing I have to add is if you are struggling with weight gain and you're noticing that it's adding just a lot of extra issues to your job, and obviously with that comes changes in possibly heart health, knowing that weightlifting, diet, and cardio is going to be incredibly important to you. And so making sure you have even if you aren't overweight, obviously still maintaining an appropriate strength training regimen, cardio regimen. We're talking anywhere from a couple times a week to even more, but minimum would ideally be 10 to 15 minutes a day of at least moderate activity. And I don't think delivery drivers that are getting in and out of vehicles are too far short of their activity level. Obviously, I don't know if they get so much into zone 2, but really what we're trying to say is there is still plenty more that can be done on top of this and should be done on top of this. This was just really the bare bones of at least keeping the body maintained, but we still have the muscle systems, joint systems, the heart systems, all those kinds of things that we still want to make sure that you guys stay on top of for a everlasting, long, healthy life. But yeah, I think what Doc just dove into there, really take that into account. Figure out your times of the day you're going to be working on these and make sure you're doing them daily. And it isn't that much time. So I know that you guys can fit them in there. You guys can do it. I got faith in you.
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. And do you know any delivery drivers or your coworkers share all this information? Just share the video so it can save you some time. Or any people that are even quite frankly sitting for longer periods of time. I know we did an office worker. Similar principles will cross apply. Share, like, subscribe, comments, leave questions. We're here to answer those the best we can from here on out as well.
Yes. Until next time, guys, thank you guys so much for watching.
Woo!
We'll see you next time.
Let's go.
Disclaimer, the content provided in this health podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast is solely at your own risk. The creators and hosts of this podcast are not responsible for any actions or decisions you may take based on the information presented.
Thanks for joining us on The Functional Code. For more evidence-based health insights, subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, your journey to a healthier you begins with understanding the Functional Code. Until next time, stay well, stay informed, and embrace the science of living well.